start there with President Donald Trump's approval ratings, which have plummeted in one poll to the lowest ever recorded in a president in his first 6 months of office. A Bloomberg national poll out this morning has President Trump's job approval rating at 40%, while Gallup puts the president rating at 38%, and the Washington Post ABC News poll finds 36% of Americans approve of the job Trump is doing. 58% disapprove. Now, with 48% saying they disapprove strongly, a level never reached by former presidents Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, and reached only in the second term of George W. Bush in this poll. The partisan breakdown of the Washington Post poll shows 82% of Republicans approve. That's down just slightly from April, while the president dropped 6 points to 32% among independents and is at just 11% with Democrats. A new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll of counties that were pivotal in Trump's 2016 victory and of the ones that he flipped from Obama in 2012, his approval rests at 44%. And on health care, that Washington Post ABC poll shows half of all Americans prefer the current health care law. About 1/4 want the Republican option being pushed right now. 17% would prefer something else altogether. Joe.
Yeah, Bob Constant, let me bring you in there. There's so much to unpack. I want to get to health care in a second because obviously that's what Republicans waking up this morning in the Senate have to be most concerned about. But first, let's talk about everything that has happened this weekend. The president awakens to 36% approval rating. He's forced to say, well, ABC is a fake poll, and actually around 40% is pretty good. Actually, it's historically low. What's the state of the White House this weekend after being pounded by another flurry of allegations about that Don Jr. meeting, and having a lot of conservative commentators coming out saying, wait a second, there's something there?
Inside the White House, Joe, my sources tell me that they never thought they had a honeymoon in terms of the national polls, in terms of most Americans. They knew they were going to run a base-centric presidency, but they did believe they had a honeymoon with that Republican Trump base. And they're starting to see some of that erode. In part, it's because of this Russia cloud that continues over the administration. In part, it's because of the promises that remain unchecked, like repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act. And the Don Jr. story hovers. They don't see it as something that's alarming the base, but it's a distraction to every other agenda item they're trying to push that they think could maybe rouse their own base, like trade, like immigration.
But let's talk about the issue right now that obviously Senate Republicans are the most concerned about. That has to do with health care. These numbers from the Washington Post ABC News poll, unbelievable. 50% of Americans, when it comes to health care, prefer Obamacare. Nothing, absence really does make the heart grow fonder. That's the highest approval rating Obamacare has ever had. 24%, only 24% support the Republican plan. There is no way that senators, Republican senators in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Maine aren't looking at those numbers and asking themselves, do I really want to jump off that cliff? How much trouble is the Republican health care reform plan in?
It's in deep trouble right now. And if you think back to the primary race in 2016, Joe, Governor Huckabee, then candidate Donald Trump, they both ran as different kinds of Republicans in this way. They did not want to tackle Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid in the way most Republicans, like House Speaker Paul Ryan, have traditionally gone after those kind of federal programs. Now Trump is in the position with an ideological Republican Congress trying to go after something that in the view of many Americans, if you look at these polls, is settled law. And that's an uncomfortable position for this White House to be in. They know they made this promise to the base, but they also know politically the base and most Americans don't want to get rid of benefits, including Medicaid funding, that's already been put in place. That's just not smart politics. They know it. They still want to get this promise through.
Nick Confessori, you look at the numbers from all of these polls, and yes, 8 out of 10 Republicans still sticking with the president, but independents have completely fallen off a cliff. You look at the people that swung from Barack Obama to Donald Trump, they're starting to bleed off that support. And it can all be summed up. I think in this Don Jr. story, you can't call it fake news because all the emails, all the lies came from Don Jr. and the White House. All the leaks are coming from inside the White House. You even have conservative commentators saying that and writing about that. And you have a White House that, as you so eloquently put in your 140 characters or less, I think on Friday, they change the story every day. And, you know, maybe the most hardcore Trump supporters may believe they can shout out fake news. But these are the president's own men and women who are leaking, and it's Don Jr.'s own words. And it looks like a lot of Americans just aren't buying their old story anymore.
Well, Joe, I think, seeing it in black and white, seeing it in Donald Jr.'s emails, is a huge difference. To see him write that, to see potential evidence of collusion right there in front of you in his words, it's hard to brush that away. You can spin it, but you can even see now the White House moving to a new line, which is to say it wasn't illegal, that laws were not broken, that there are no laws against this kind of thing. So I'm not a lawyer. I'm just going to point out that if you're moving towards what's legal as opposed to what's right and proper, you're backing yourself into a bit of a corner. I think who we're kind of seeing lost here for Trump, Joe and Mika, is the Trump curious voter. So the core Trump voter is always going to be the core Trump voter. He's delivering what they asked for, which is to break up Washington and go to war in Washington. But the Trump curious voter was kind of curious to see if his style would make a difference, if it would change how Washington worked for the best, if it would be a new style, a new way of doing things for the better. And I think what we're seeing here is some loss of faith and perhaps a kind of a throwing into the towel and saying, oh, it's the usual thing in Washington. Trump is no different from the other guys.
Yeah, and Mika, obviously, you have all the lies that are being told, but you look at the policies, and the Medicaid cuts will, of course, ravage the poor, but will also ravage working-class Americans in rural communities that went for Donald Trump. I talked to one hospital consultant this past weekend who was a big Trump supporter, who actually said that communities across America, in middle America, that went for Trump will see a lot of their economies really damaged because these massive cuts to Medicaid will actually hit the top employers in their communities the biggest, and that's the rural hospitals.
Well, that's when they'll really feel it. But Elise Jordan, I'm wondering, even on the face of it, for the core Trump supporter, if they're watching Trump or Don Jr., for example, the other day on Sean Hannity's show, which is arguably a host who's in the tank for President Trump, arguably. I would say he probably is completely, but that's just my opinion. When they see him saying, point blank, that's all there is. It was just me, Jared, Paul Manafort, which you would think is bad enough, with this Russian lawyer. And then you find out there's another person, and then you find out there's 6 people, and then you might find out there's 8 people. I mean, how are you not at that point wavering on whether or not this presidency is telling America the truth?
Well, I think the problem with having Donald Trump Jr. as your front man is that, he doesn't exactly bring confidence of, his basic competency, given how this whole, email scenario and what he actually did, these unsavory meetings with Russian affiliated individuals. So I think that isn't exactly confidence building. And then you look at the policies that Donald Trump is trying to enact, and you look at the members of the cabinet that he's brought in and how dominated it is by crony capitalism, essentially. And Donald Trump was brought in to, destroy special interests. He was brought in to disrupt the system. And you just see more of the same old, same old. So I wonder how long it's going to take without any traction on any actual policy for some of Donald Trump, for Donald Trump's numbers among his hardcore supporters to drop. But I do think that it's almost psychological at this point. If you supported Trump, you do want to dig into your support, just because for so long everyone in the media was telling you that it was a terrible decision. And there was, this was a lot, with a lot of the polling that we did, we didn't necessarily, the support for Trump wasn't necessarily reflected in polls. So I'll be interested to see how that resolves.
And there are a lot of people that did dig in and were told they were foolish for supporting Donald Trump. by the media, by a lot of elites out of Washington, D.C., and they're going to be more reluctant to admit to a pollster that they're no longer supporting this guy that they stuck with for a year and a half. But David Ignatius, I want to talk about, Lisa was talking about more of the same. There is one thing that Donald Trump is saying that is more of the same, and that his lawyers are saying, and that the administration's now saying, now that they've just been busted lying time and time and time again about meeting with the Russians, about this specific meeting. Donald Trump, the President of the United States, saying, hey, there's nothing new about opposition research. Us meeting with a former KGB agent, us meeting with a series of Russians, us lying about the people who were in attendance there, us lying about Manafort and Jared Kushner being notified by it, Jared Kushner not putting even more people on. This is just more of the same. Everybody engages in opposition research. Everybody does this. David, I know I've talked to Republican and Democratic consultants who have worked on hundreds of campaigns. I've yet to meet one that would talk to the Russians for opposition research, or Iran, or other people who are hostile to the United States of America. What about you? Have you found anyone telling you that this is just more of the same, or is this as serious as it seems?
Joe, I think you put your finger on the common sense heart of this. You get an email in which a meeting is proposed with someone who's described as a representative of the Russian government, which wants to give you information that's going to help your campaign and hurt your opponent. And I think the natural response of a law-abiding citizen in a situation where Russia is regarded as an adversary is you pick up the phone and you call the FBI and say, the Russians are trying to set up a meeting with me. What should I do? What's appropriate here?
And David, this isn't even a close call, is it? I can't imagine somebody coming to my office when I was in Congress saying, hey, we have opposition research on the Democrat. It's from the Russian government. Would you like to take the meeting? I'd say, go to hell. You're fired. And then I'd talk to the person over their shoulder and say, get me the FBI. This is not even a close call, is it?
It would not be a close call for anyone that I know and have talked to who serves in government and deals with sensitive issues. I mean, it's astonishing that Jared Kushner still has his security clearances when he has disclosed that, contrary to initial disclosure forms, he had meetings like this. The president has the authority to decide who gets these clearances and who doesn't. But, you know, Joe, I'm struck as I watch this unfold. It's a little bit like an army retreating. There's a strong position that's set, and then it's overrun, and then you retreat to another position. And then you're asserting something different, and then that one gets overrun, and then you pull back a little further. And I think that's part of the Trump team's problem, is that they just don't have firm lines that they can hold. As each new revelation comes, there's a scramble. They'd love to have something hard to give back to their base. I think that's why health care is so important. They have to deliver something that shows we're governing. It's not just this cloud of phony scandal. We're governing, and they don't have that yet.
Well, I don't get that, because then when they show they're governing, they're going to give their base something that hurts them. But whatever.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.